I still remember the way the cold bit through my coat that morning. How the wind stung my eyes until the world blurred. How I stood there, suitcase by my feet, pie in my hands, waiting for a car that never came. You ever had a moment like that? The kind that splits your life in two, before and after? That was mine. I'd flown across 3 states with a ticket I'd paid for myself. Packed gifts, baked Greg's favorite pie. The one he used to beg for every Thanksgiving when he was little. Apple with the crumb top. I'd imagined us laughing again, maybe even healing a bit after all the distance. But when I stepped off that plane, there was no one waiting. No warm hug. No "Hey Mom, over here." Just the smell of jet fuel and that sharp November wind. First, I thought maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe the kids were slow getting out the door. So I waited. Then I checked my phone. Nothing. Texted. Well, nothing. That's when the message popped up. Photo. Greg, Meline, the grandkids. All smiling around a golden turkey. A caption underneath. "Full house this year, red heart." My throat went dry. The pie in my hands suddenly weighed 100 pounds. I don't even remember how long I stood there before I finally walked out of the terminal. But I do remember the moment I understood. They hadn't forgotten me. They just didn't care enough to include me. I ended up at a little diner across from the airport. The waitress brought me coffee and a slice of store-bought pumpkin pie. I smiled, thanked her, and told her it looked good. It wasn't. But I ate every bite because at that moment it wasn't about the pie. It was about proving to myself I could still taste something other than bitterness. You spend your whole life loving people who only call when they need something, and one day, it hits you. Love shouldn't feel like waiting at a curb for a car that's never coming. That night when I finally got back home, I didn't cry. I didn't call. I just took that pie dish, still wrapped in foil, and set it in the sink. The next morning I washed it clean. And as the frost melted outside my kitchen window, I decided something. No more waiting. No more begging to be seen. It was time to draw a line. Because sometimes, the only way to save what's left of your heart is to stop handing it to people who treat it like spare change. The morning after I came home from that airport, the world looked different. Not softer. Not sadder. Just sharper. Like everything that used to blur in the background had suddenly come into focus. The frost outside had started to melt, tiny rivers of water tracing their way down the driveway. I stood there, holding my coffee, thinking, this is what it feels like when something inside you finally unfreezes. By 9 o'clock I was standing in line at the bank. My hands didn't tremble. Not even once. When it was my turn, the teller, a young woman with pink glasses and a kind smile, asked, "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I need to revoke an authorization," I said. She blinked. "Revoke?" "Yes," I repeated, steady. "Effective immediately." She looked at me like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. Most people come to the bank asking for loans or joint accounts, not to close doors. But I was done opening them for people who only walk through when it benefited them. I watched her fingers move across the keyboard, the clack of each key sounding like a little exhale of freedom. When she handed me the form, I read it carefully, line by line. Then I signed it. No hesitation. No tears. Just a quiet click of the pen. By the time I stepped out of that building, the frost had vanished completely. The sun was warm enough to touch. I didn't rush home. I stopped at the bakery on the corner, the one with the handwritten chalkboard menu and the smell of cinnamon that always finds its way to the street. Bought myself a roll, still warm from the oven. It wasn't about punishing Greg. Not really. It was about reclaiming the parts of me I'd been giving away piece by piece, until there was nothing left to protect. Because love doesn't grow from sacrifice alone. Needs light. Needs truth. And I had been living too long in someone else's shade. When I got home, I saw the pie dish still sitting in the drying rack. I pulled it out, wiped it gently, and slid it into the cabinet. Maybe someday I'd bake another one. Maybe not. But I knew this much. I wouldn't bake for people who left me standing on a curb again. That afternoon I called my lawyer, Mr. Altman. He'd known me for over 30 years. Handled our house purchase, my husband's will, everything. When he picked up, his voice was the same warm rumble it had always been. "Mrs. Wexler," he said, "what can I do for you today?" "I need to make changes to my estate," I said. "And I want to establish a trust." There was a pause. Then softly, "For Emma?" "Yes." He didn't ask why. He didn't have to. Men like Mr. Altman have seen every shade of family disappointment that exists. We set an appointment for the next morning. And when I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt clear. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and a cup of tea cooling beside me. The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the rustle of dry leaves skipping down the sidewalk. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. I wasn't healed. I wasn't okay. But I was steady. Like someone who had finally stopped knocking on a door that was never going to open. She's found her resolve, but the next morning's meeting with Mr. Altman will start reshaping her entire future. The next morning, the sky was wrapped in pale gray, that kind of winter light that makes everything look like it's holding its breath. I dressed slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't want to rush what came next. By 9 sharp, I was at Mr. Altman's office. Same old green shutters. Same brass handle that stuck if you didn't pull hard enough. Inside, the smell of old paper and lemon polish wrapped around me like memory itself. The receptionist, a young man I didn't recognize, led me to Mr. Altman's office. He stood up the moment I walked in. "Mrs. Wexler," he said with a smile that carried both warmth and caution. "It's good to see you." "And you," I said. His office hadn't changed in 20 years. The same clock ticking behind his desk, the same family photos framed in gold, even the same small bulldog figurine sitting by the window. But the air between us was different this time. He sat, folded his hands and asked gently, "So, what are we changing today?" "My will," I said. "And I want to create a trust." His pen hovered over the pad. "Who are we naming as the beneficiary?" "My granddaughter, Emma." He nodded once. "And Gregory?" "Removed," I said. "Along with his wife." He didn't blink. Didn't even flinch. Just kept writing. His pen moving like a soft drumbeat of understanding. "I assume this is a full transfer of assets." "Yes. My home, pension, certificates, everything in my name goes into the trust." He looked up then, not as a lawyer but as an old friend. "Emma's a good girl," he said softly. "Always was." Something caught in my throat. "She's the only one who still sees me as a person," I said. "Not a purse." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he nodded once and said, "Let's make sure your wishes are honored." For the next hour we worked through every detail. He asked questions, I gave firm answers. No hesitation. No second-guessing. The fog that used to cloud my decisions was gone. When we finished, he gathered the papers into a neat stack and looked at me with something close to respect. "I'll have the final draft ready in a few days," he said. "We'll get it notarized and sealed." "You've made some brave choices, Irene." "Not brave," I said quietly. "Just overdue." When I stepped outside, the cold air bit at my cheeks, but it felt good clean. I stopped at the florist on the way home and bought a small poinsettia. Bright red. Live. I didn't decorate much anymore, but I wanted something vibrant on the kitchen table. A reminder that beauty could exist even after endings. When I walked through the front door, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Grandma." My heart shifted. "Emma." Her voice came through breathy, warm. "I got your letter." I sank into the kitchen chair. "You did?" I didn't know what happened," she said. "Dad and Meline told me you canceled your flight last minute. They made it sound like you just changed your mind." "Course they did." "I was there," I said softly. "I landed. Waited. I saw the photos." There was silence on the line. Then a small, trembling breath. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. That wasn't your burden to carry. I should have called. I should have checked." You didn't know, I said gently. You're not the one who made that choice. She sniffled. It didn't feel right without you there. It just didn't. My chest tightened. For the first time since that airport, tears burned at the back of my eyes, but they didn't fall. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you know. There was a pause between us. Not awkward, just full. Then she said, can I come visit next weekend? I got a break from classes. I'll take the train. Smiled. Of course. The guest room's ready. I'll bring the chessboard, she said, her voice lighter now. You still play. I never stopped. When I hung up, I just sat there for a while, hands still resting on the receiver. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. Felt seen. That Saturday, I stood at the train station in my warmest coat, watching passengers step off the 11:37 from Worcester. The air smelled like diesel and cold rain. I held a small paper bag in my hands, a sandwich and an apple, in case she'd forgotten to eat. And then I saw her. Oversized hoodie, worn canvas bag, hair tucked under a beanie. The moment her eyes met mine, she smiled. Wait, unfiltered, real. She ran, and when she reached me, she didn't say a word. She just hugged me. The kind of hug that doesn't ask questions. The kind that says, you're still home to me. Hi, Grandma, she whispered into my shoulder. Hi, baby, I said. You're here. Their reunion rekindles warmth, but it also sets the stage for the deeper emotional confrontation to come, the reckoning with Greg and Meline's silence. When she hugged me, something inside me unclenched. Like a door I didn't know I'd locked had finally opened. We drove home in silence, the kind that doesn't hurt. Emma stared out the window, watching the streets she used to bike down in the summers. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, even though my heart was trembling. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same maple trees, same faded fences, but with her beside me, it felt different. Warmer. Lived in again. Home. I made tea. She dropped her bag in the guest room, then came back to the living room and curled up in the same corner of the couch she used to claim when she was little. The chessboard was waiting on the coffee table. You ready to lose again? Tease. She grinned. Not a chance. We played 2 rounds. She won the first, I won the second. Balance. Later we sat at the kitchen table, both of us nursing our mugs. The poinsettia I'd bought earlier that week sat between us. Still red, still alive. I read your letter again on the train, she said quietly. I've never seen you write like that before. Smiled. I've never had to. She frowned. You sounded different. I used to think being quiet was a kind of grace, I said. But now I think it just made me easy to ignore. Emma looked up. I never ignored you. I know, I said. That's why you're still here. She hesitated then, like she was holding something fragile in her mouth. Dad doesn't know I came, she said finally. I figured. He called a couple nights ago. Asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. And what did you tell him? I didn't lie, she said. I just said we hadn't talked yet. That was kind of you. She shook her head. It wasn't kindness, Grandma. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal. Her voice didn't crack, it didn't need to. That quiet steadiness carried more truth than any outburst could. I reached across the table, laid my hand over hers. You don't have to pretend here, I said. She nodded, eyes glistening. Neither do you. For a long time we just sat like that. 2 women from different generations finally seeing each other not as roles but as people. And for the first time in weeks, I realized something startling. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need Greg or Meline to apologize. I didn't need a phone call, a text, or some half-hearted attempt at closure. Had this moment, this peace. My house. Iggy. My granddaughter's laughter filling the empty corners. That evening, Emma offered to make dinner. She cooked pasta with garlic and spinach, and I grated the cheese while she hummed softly under her breath. The sound reminded me of when she was a little girl, sitting on the kitchen counter, legs swinging, helping me bake cookies. We watched an old movie afterward, something silly and warm. We laughed harder than the jokes deserved. Before bed, she sat beside me on the couch and said, "Grandma, I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said. "Promise." "I can't promise forever," I said softly. "But I'm not going anywhere yet." She smiled, hugged me again. Gentler this time but just as real. After she went to sleep, I sat in the living room alone. The clock ticked softly behind me. On the mantel, old photographs caught the lamplight. Faces that had faded with time. But one photo stood out. Me holding Emma as a baby. My hair darker. My hands younger. The grip steady, protective. I stared at it for a long time, until the edges of the frame blurred through my tears. When Sunday came, we lingered on the porch before her train. I handed her a container of leftover pasta, a scarf I'd knitted last winter, and the kind of love you don't need to explain. She kissed my cheek and promised to call Tuesday. Then she was gone. A quick wave through the train window, her breath fogging the glass. I stood there until the train became a speck, then nothing. When I stepped back inside, the house felt quiet again, but not lonely. It was the kind of silence that follows something sacred. I picked up the mugs, folded the blanket from the couch, tucked the chessboard back on the shelf. Then I opened the kitchen drawer, the one with the files. Greg's folder was thick. Emma's was thin. And for the first time I saw what that meant. The quiet is deceptive. She's no longer grieving, she's preparing. What comes next isn't sadness. It's a reckoning. I didn't mean to open the drawer that day. Just call to me. Greg's folder sat heavy on the left, swollen with receipts, notes, old checks. Emma's was light, almost weightless. And for the first time I didn't feel sad about it. Felt awake. I pulled out a yellow pad and a pen. And I started writing. Not out of bitterness, out of truth. One by one, I listed everything I'd paid for in the last 15 years. Not the obvious things, not gifts or birthdays. The quiet things. The "of course mom will handle it" things. Home repairs. Medical deductibles. A down payment when Greg's second car broke down. Groceries when Meline was too tired to shop. Ruby's school fundraisers I was guilted into supporting. Each line felt like pressing a bruise. Not to make it hurt, but to finally see where the ache came from. By the time I was done, I had 4 full pages. 4 pages of proof that I had been the invisible thread holding their lives together. I looked at the list, really looked, and whispered to myself, I wasn't generous. I was convenient. That hit hard, because I'd always believed mothers give. That's what we do. That's love. But love isn't supposed to empty you. Supposed to grow in both directions. I sat there for a long time, the house so quiet I could hear the heater clicking on and off. And somewhere in that silence, I understood. I'd spent years trying to earn a seat at a table I'd built myself. At 3:17 p.m. the phone rang. Greg's name on the screen. I didn't pick up. A minute later a voicemail. Then a text. Mom. Just checking in. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free to talk. No urgency. No emotion. No apology. Just words. I stared at the message. Then deleted the voicemail without listening. The text I left unread. That night I lit a candle. No reason. No ritual. Just because. The tiny flame flickered against the kitchen wall. Soft, alive, steady. I poured myself a glass of wine. One of the good bottles I'd been saving for company. I laughed at that thought, company. I was the company now. I set a single place at the table. Heated some leftover soup. Sat down. Slowly. Not scrolling. Not waiting. Not hoping for someone to remember me. I was right there in my own life and it was enough. Later before bed I opened my email. Found the folder labeled travel. At the bottom was my Thanksgiving flight receipt. Round trip completed. I forwarded it to myself. And in the subject line I typed, proof of departure and return. No rescue. No reunion. Just me. I didn't send it to anyone else. I didn't need to. The next morning I called Mr. Altman, my lawyer. His voice was warm, the kind that aged like good wood. "Mrs. Wexler, what can I do for you?" "I've been thinking," I said. "I want to make a change." He didn't ask what kind. He didn't have to. "I want to create a trust for Emma." He paused. Not surprised, just respectful. "Of course," he said. "We can set that up right away." When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt clear. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and tea cooling on the railing. The street was quiet, still, like the world was listening. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for a family photo with an empty chair saved for me. I wasn't waiting at all. I was becoming. Irene has found her voice, but the world she once kept silent for is about to notice the change. I didn't hesitate. The next morning I walked into the bank like I was walking into the rest of my life. The air was sharp, my breath a cloud in front of me. Frost on the railings. Each step up those concrete stairs felt heavier. Not with fear but finality. Inside, the warmth hit me. The teller smiled politely, the way young people smile at women they think are harmless. "Good morning, Mrs. Wexler. How can we help you today?" Smiled back. "I'd like to speak to someone about my accounts." "All of them." A flicker of confusion crossed his face, not used to seeing certainty in someone like me. He made a quick call, then ushered me toward a glass-walled office at the back. Natalie was her name. My account manager. Mid-30s, calm, professional. The kind of woman who probably started her mornings with green juice and affirmations. She stood as I entered, her handshake firm. "What can I do for you today, Mrs. Wexler?" "I want to suspend all automatic payments," I said. "Every single one. Effective immediately." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. "All of them." "Yes, all of them." She typed, scanning the list on her screen. "You have several recurring transfers, tuition, car insurance, some assistance payments to family members, a few monthly charitable donations." "Keep the charities," I said. "Stop the rest." Her eyes flicked up to mine. Not judgmental, just curious. "Do you want to talk about why?" I looked at her for a moment. Really looked. Then said, "No. I've already spent enough of my life explaining myself." She nodded once. Respectfully. "Understood." While she worked, I watched the street through the glass. A young mother buckled her toddler into a car seat. An older man with a walker shuffled past. A delivery truck idled too long in the loading zone. Life moved on. Quietly. Unbothered. Finally, Natalie said, "It's done. Everything's been suspended. If you'd like to fully terminate the accounts tomorrow, I'll have the paperwork ready." "Good," I said. "I'll be back." She hesitated just slightly. "There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Wexler. Do you still want him to have access?" Felt my pulse slow. Not rise slow. "No," I said. "Revoke it." She printed the form without question. I signed it with a steady hand. When I left the bank, the frost had melted. My reflection in the glass door looked unfamiliar. Taller somehow. I didn't rush. Stopped by the bakery on the corner. Bought myself a warm roll, still steaming. Small, simple joy. Reminder. It wasn't about punishing Greg. Not really. It was about finally drawing a line where I hadn't before. Because love isn't about depletion. It's not about being the one who always gives, hoping someone will notice. Needs reciprocity. Like, respect. Back home I washed the pie dish. Dried it carefully. Put it away. Maybe I'd bake another someday. Maybe not. But if I did, it wouldn't be for people who left me standing in the cold. That afternoon I called Mr. Altman again. He'd been my lawyer for more than 30 years. Handled our wills, our home, my husband's estate. A voice that had seen the timeline of my life written in contracts and signatures. "Mrs. Wexler," he said warmly, "what can I do for you today?" "I'd like to make some changes to my estate," I said. "And I want to establish a trust for Emma." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. People like him have seen every kind of heartbreak dressed in polite sentences. We set a meeting for the next morning. When I hung up, I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the light fading through the blinds, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. No triumph, no gloating, just a calm kind of certainty. That night, I sat on the porch, the blanket around my shoulders, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. Few neighbors walked by. One waved. One didn't. The air smelled faintly of smoke and winter. I wasn't okay, not yet. But I was steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't the woman waiting on the curb. I was the woman walking away from it. Tomorrow, Irene will face her past in ink and paper. And in doing so, she'll rewrite not just her will but her worth. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from worry, from anticipation. By morning, the sky was low and gray, soft like old linen. I took my time getting dressed. Not because I was tired but because I wanted to honor the day. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a reckoning. At 9 sharp, I pushed open the heavy door to Mr. Altman's office. The place smelled exactly the same, like dust, wood polish and time. The walls still lined with framed photos of his children, his boat, his bulldog in a Santa hat. He stood when he saw me. "Mrs. Wexler," he said, that old respectful smile still intact. "It's good to see you. And you, Mr. Altman." We sat. Same chairs, same ticking wall clock. Only now, the air between us felt different. He was used to me being agreeable, the woman who nodded through decisions. Not today. He folded his hands. "What are we changing today?" "My will," I said. "And I want to create a trust. Everything I own, every cent, every asset, I want it protected. And I want it to go to Emma. Only Emma." He didn't blink. Just nodded, calm as ever. "I assume we're removing Gregory and Meline." "Yes," I said. "They've had enough from me. More than enough." He paused, his pen hovering over the pad. "And the home? Pension account? CDs? All of it," I said. "If it has my name, it moves to the trust." He looked up. "You've thought this through." "I have. And you'll retain full control while you're living." "Of course," I said. "Exactly." He leaned back, the leather of his chair creaking softly. "Emma's a good girl," he said. "Always was." Something caught in my throat. "She's the only one who still sees me as a person," I said. "Not a purse." He didn't flinch. "Lawyers like him have seen too many polite betrayals dressed up as family." "Then let's make sure your wishes are honored," he said gently. For the next hour we went line by line. Every account, every asset, every loose end. He asked questions. I gave firm answers. No more hesitation. No more giving the benefit of the doubt. When he gathered the papers into a neat stack, he looked at me, not with pity, but with something close to admiration. "I'll have the final draft ready in a few days," he said. "We'll notarize everything, and that'll be that." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. Outside, the air had shifted, crisp and bright. I walked home slowly, stopping at the florist. Bought a small poinsettia, a burst of red for my kitchen table. Something alive, something mine. The phone rang just as I stepped through the door. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Grandma." That voice. My heart lifted. "Emma," I said, sitting down at the table. "You got my letter." "I did," she said, voice trembling slightly. I didn't know what happened. Dad and Meline said you canceled your flight. They made it sound like you changed your mind." "Of course they did." There was a pause. "You were there, weren't you?" "I was," I said softly. "I landed. Waited. I saw the photos." Her breath caught. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "I know, sweetheart," I said. "That's not on you. I should have called. I should have checked." "No," I said gently. "You didn't know. You're not the one who made that choice." She sniffled. "It didn't feel right without you, Grandma. It wasn't the same." For the first time since the airport, tears burned behind my eyes. Not from pain, but from something purer. "Thank you," I said. That means more than you know. There was a pause between us. Not awkward, just full. Then she said, "Can I come visit next weekend? I have a break from classes. I'll take the train." My heart bloomed wide and fragile. "Of course," I said. "The guest room is ready." "I'll bring the chessboard," she said. "You still play?" I never stopped. We hung up and I just sat there, hand resting on the phone, my reflection caught in the kitchen window. For once, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel forgotten. Felt seen. That Saturday just before noon I stood at the train station. The air smelled like rain and diesel. I clutched a paper bag, a sandwich and an apple, just in case she'd forgotten to eat. Then I saw her. Emma, stepping off the train, hoodie too big, curls tucked under a beanie. She looked older, sharper. But when her eyes found me, she smiled. Ran. And when her arms wrapped around me, it was like being stitched back together. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered into my shoulder. "Hi, baby," I said. "You're here." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. But peace never stays unchallenged. What comes next will test the strength Irene just found, when someone else comes knocking. When she hugged me at the station, I swear time slowed down. There was nothing polite about it. No careful arms, no hesitation, just pure, desperate love. We stood there for longer than people usually do in public. And I didn't care who stared. It had been years since I'd felt a hug that real. Years since someone had held me because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated. When she finally pulled back, I touched her face, memorizing her. She was taller now. Her eyes older, sharper but kind. And I thought, this is what legacy looks like when love survives the wreckage. We drove home in silence, the good kind again. The kind that doesn't ache or accuse, it just lets you breathe. Emma looked out the window, taking in the familiar streets. "You still live near the bakery?" she asked. "I do," I smiled. "They still make those terrible muffins you used to love." She laughed. The same laugh from when she was a child, bright and full-bodied. God, I'd missed that sound. At home, I made tea while she unpacked in the guest room. When she came back, she flopped onto the couch, curling her legs beneath her like she'd never left. "You didn't change a thing," she said, glancing around. "I guess I was waiting," I admitted. "For me." I smiled softly. "Maybe." The chessboard was already on the coffee table. I'd set it out that morning. "You ready to lose again?" she teased. Bold words for someone who still confuses a bishop for a pawn. We played 2 games. She won the first. I won the second. Then we both laughed like it actually mattered. Later we sat at the kitchen table, nursing mugs of tea gone cold. The poinsettia I'd bought that week sat between us, a tiny burst of red in all that quiet. "I read your letter again on the train," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. "I've never seen you write like that before." I smiled faintly. "I've never had to." "You sounded free," she said. "I'm learning." She hesitated. "You said in the letter that you finally stopped waiting for people who forgot to show up." He nodded. She looked down. "I get that. I've spent a lot of my life waiting too." I reached across the table, brushed her hand. "Then stop," I said. "Start showing up for yourself. That's where it begins." She didn't answer right away. Just looked at me like she was seeing the woman I'd been hiding all these years. "Dad doesn't know I'm here," she finally said. "I figured. He called a couple nights ago. Asked if I'd seen you since Thanksgiving. And I didn't lie," she said softly. "I just said we hadn't talked yet." Smiled. "That was kind." She shook her head. "It wasn't kindness. It was exhaustion. I'm tired of pretending things are normal." That sentence, calm, certain, hit deeper than any apology ever could. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. "You don't have to pretend here. Not ever." She smiled through glassy eyes. "Neither do you." That night she cooked dinner. Pasta with garlic and spinach. I grated the cheese while she hummed softly, The same tune she used to sing in the kitchen as a little girl. After dinner, we watched an old movie. Something we'd both seen too many times. We laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny, just because it felt good to laugh in the same room again. When the credits rolled, she turned to me. "Grandma," she whispered, "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said. "Promise." I took her hand. "I can't promise forever," I said softly. "But I'm not going anywhere yet." She smiled, small, sincere, then leaned against me until her breathing slowed, heavy with sleep. I didn't move. Didn't want to. Later, when I finally went to bed, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was full. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. When Sunday came, we lingered on the porch before her train. I gave her a container of leftover pasta, a scarf I'd knitted last winter, and a love I didn't have to explain. She kissed my cheek. "Call you Tuesday," she said. "Promise." She grinned. "You can't get rid of me that easy." And then she was gone, her breath fogging the glass as the train pulled away. I stood there until the sound disappeared, then went back inside. The house felt quieter but not hollow. It was the kind of silence that follows something sacred. I started tidying, folding the blanket from the couch, picking up mugs, resetting the chessboard. When I reached the kitchen, I opened the drawer. The folders were still there. Greg's, thick and heavy. Emma's, still light. But this time I didn't feel small looking at them. I felt something stirring, something almost dangerous. Irene has found peace, but she's not done yet. Because when love grows stronger, silence doesn't go unnoticed, and someone is about to come knocking. The knock came just as I was folding laundry. 3 slow raps. Not hurried. Not friendly. The kind of knock that carries hesitation. That says, "I almost didn't come." I froze. A towel half folded in my hands. It wasn't the mailman. Not the neighbor. I knew that rhythm. Calculated. When I opened the door, there she was. Perfect hair, perfect coat, perfect posture. Like she'd stepped out of a magazine instead of my past. Her heels looked too narrow for my cracked sidewalk, and her tote bag hung heavy at her side. "Irene," she said, her voice pitched just right. Practiced concern. "Can we talk?" For a second I just stared at her. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." She glanced around as she entered, eyes flicking over every surface. The bookshelves, the photos, the clean kitchen counters, as if expecting to find dust or damage. The house looked the same, but the energy didn't. She felt it too. I led her to the living room. She didn't sit until I did. She crossed her legs, folded her hands in her lap. "First," she began, "I just want to say this whole thing has been a huge misunderstanding." I said nothing. "Greg thought your flight was Friday," she continued, her tone smooth, rehearsed. "That's what he told me. We didn't realize you'd already landed." "And the photo?" "Yes." She blinked. "What photo?" "The Thanksgiving photo," I said, steady. "The one captioned Full House." Her eyes flickered. "Oh, that was just something I posted for the holiday. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." She looked down, then up again too quickly. "Well, yes, but I think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. You've shut us out." I exhaled slowly. "No, Melaine. I just stopped filling in the silence for you. There's a difference." Her mouth tightened. "I came here because we want to make things right." I looked at her then, really looked. At the flawless foundation. The faint tremor in her voice. The exhaustion behind her eyes. "You didn't come to make things right," I said softly. "You came to see if I was still useful." Her eyes widened. "That's not fair." "But it's true." She shifted in her seat, glancing toward the hallway like Greg might magically appear to save her. "I've given enough," I said. "More than enough. And I've decided where the rest of it goes." That got her attention. Her face froze, composure cracking just slightly. "I'm not angry," I said. "Not bitter. Just finished." "Irene," she said, and now her voice was colder, smaller. "This isn't like you." "I know," I said. "It's like me now." A silence stretched between us, thick and uneasy. Then her voice sharpened. "Does Greg know you've made changes? I imagine he's starting to suspect." "And the house," she pressed. "Your accounts. Are those taken care of too?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She could see it in my eyes. Finally she stood. "Well," she said tightly, "I'm sorry you feel this way." I smiled faintly. "No, Melaine. You're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserve." She looked toward the door, jaw clenched. "Greg really is worried, you know." "He should be," I said quietly. "Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back." The words landed like a closing door before the actual one did. When she left, she didn't slam it, just pulled it shut with the softest click. I stood there a long moment, my hand still on the knob, feeling the echo of it. Then I turned back to my kitchen. The towels were still warm from the dryer. The candle still flickering faintly by the window. Everything exactly where I left it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down. For the first time, silence didn't sting. It felt earned. The phone rang that evening. Greg again. I let it ring. Not out of spite, but because the silence finally belonged to me. Irene has finally faced them. But strength doesn't end at confrontation. It's tested in what comes after. And tomorrow she'll wake up different. Unshakable. I woke up early. Not because I had to, but because my body remembered what peace feels like. The light coming through the blinds was soft, the kind of pale morning that doesn't demand anything. Just arrives. I made tea, wrapped myself in the old quilt draped over my porch chair, and watched the world wake up. A skateboard rolled somewhere down the street. Child laughed. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of frost and distant smoke. Winter wasn't here yet, but I could feel it waiting. I thought about Melaine's visit. Not with anger, not even sadness. Just curiosity. Like remembering a story you used to care about but don't anymore. She hadn't come for peace. She came for control. And for the first time in a long time I hadn't given it. That was the victory. Not the argument. Not the will. The silence that followed. The kind that says, "You can't reach me anymore." Around noon the phone rang. Her voice came through bright and steady. "Hi, Grandma. I'm on break. Just wanted to check in. How's your week been?" I smiled into the receiver. Eventful. But steady. Something in my tone made her pause. Something happened. Melaine stopped by. She sighed. I figured she would. She and Dad said they wanted to make things right. "They said that," I replied. "Did they?" she asked. "No," I said simply. But I wasn't surprised. Or shaken. There was a pause on the other end. Then quietly. "You sound different." "Do I?" "Yeah. Stronger." Smiled. "I think I am." We talked for a while. About her classes, her patients, her cat who apparently had a vendetta against glass vases. Simple things. Ordinary things. The kind that make up a life. When we hung up, I didn't feel that hollow ache of goodbye. I felt grounded. The kind of peace that doesn't need to be announced. Later that day, I cleaned out the spare room drawers. Not from necessity, from choice. I found old linens, jewelry I hadn't worn in years, and a pair of silver earrings I'd once saved for Ruby's 16th birthday. I held them for a long time. Simple. Elegant. Still beautiful. They reminded me of the version of love I used to believe in. The kind that gives and waits to be seen. But now I understood something else. Some love isn't meant to be reciprocated. It's meant to be released. I set the earrings aside. Not bitterly, just finally. That night I wrote in my notebook again. Not a letter this time. List. The top I wrote. Things I no longer owe. And beneath it. Explanations. Second chances for people who wasted first ones. Apologies for taking up space. A seat at a table that won't make room. Silence. Then I turned the page and started a new list. Things I still have. And I wrote. My name, my peace, my mind, my home, my granddaughter's voice in my ear saying, "Stronger." I tore the page out, folded it carefully, and taped it to the inside of the cabinet beneath the sink, right behind the dish gloves and sponges. A strange place for strength, maybe, but real. That evening I set the table for one again. But this time I lit 2 candles, not for guests, not for ghosts, but for me. I spooned out soup, poured my tea, and whispered, not for drama but because it needed to be said, "I'm still here." And I was. Irene has reclaimed her peace. But there's one more step, one act left that turns her strength into legacy. The final transformation comes next. I woke up before dawn the next morning. No alarm. No reason. Just that quiet nudge that comes when something inside you knows it's time. The house was still. The air faintly cool. I made coffee and sat at the table, the same one that had seen decades of birthdays, arguments, and long silences. This time it felt different, lighter, as if it had finally forgiven me for what I allowed to continue here. My pen waited beside my notebook, and I knew what needed to be written. Letter. Not the kind you mail. The kind that outlives you. I started it the way I always do, honestly. To whoever's reading this after I'm gone. Pause. The ink shimmered under the kitchen light. If you're wondering why things were divided this way, let me say clearly, this is not punishment. It's honesty. I sat back and breathed. The words didn't sting, they settled. I've spent my life giving quietly, believing love meant sacrifice. But love without respect isn't love. Presence without care isn't family. The truth felt like a warm blade, sharp but cleansing. I chose the one person who saw me before I vanished. The one who showed up not for what I gave, but for who I was. I stopped there. The rest could wait. Some truths don't need to be written all at once. They need to breathe between sentences. When I set the pen down, the morning light had shifted. Soft gold spilling over the counter, glinting off the coffee mug. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel old. Felt complete. Around 10 a.m. my phone buzzed. Her name lit up my screen like a false alarm. I let it ring. Then came the text. "Hi Irene. Hope you're well. Greg mentioned you've been hard to reach lately. Let's catch up soon." Catch up. The words landed like an insult wrapped in politeness. We weren't co-workers. We weren't distant acquaintances. I'd been her mother-in-law for 15 years. I'd helped her find her first real job. Paid for her mother's funeral flowers when their budget was too tight. Catch up. I set the phone down without replying. An hour later, another buzz. This time Greg. "Mom. Meline tried calling. We're starting to get worried. Can you just let us know you're okay?" The irony nearly made me laugh. They hadn't been worried when I stood on a curb with my suitcase, waiting for a car that never came. They hadn't been worried when they carved turkey without me. When they posted photos captioned "full house." But now, when silence answered them back, they panicked. That's what silence does. It unnerves the people who depended on your noise to fill their guilt. I kept the phone off for the rest of the day. That evening I went up to the attic. Not to hide, to remember. The air smelled of dust and old wood. Boxes lined the walls. My life in cardboard. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just the past. I found an old box labeled 1990 to 2005. Inside, letters from Greg when he was a teenager. Drawings from Emma when she was little. A photo of my husband holding a pumpkin pie like it was a trophy. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by paper ghosts. So many pieces of myself I'd stored away to make room for everyone else. And that's when I found it. A small envelope with Greg's childhood handwriting. "To Mom, because your heart is louder than the rain." I smiled, that ache in your throat kind of smile. He was just a boy then. The boy who used to fall asleep with his head against my chest. The boy I taught to tie his shoes with 2 loops because one never made sense to him. I loved him completely once. Maybe I still did. But love doesn't excuse neglect. And forgiveness doesn't mean return. Not anymore. I closed the box carefully, dusted off my hands and exhaled. That night, I took out my notebook again and added 2 lines to the letter. Emma, you saw me, not out of obligation, not for what I gave, but because you chose to. That's what family is. Respect. Truth. The pen felt heavier in my hand, but it moved anyway. And with each word I felt lighter. By the time I finished, the page trembled from the weight of everything it carried, and everything it finally let go of. Irene has spoken her truth, but she isn't done yet. One more act remains. A signature that seals not just a document, but her freedom. By morning I knew what I had to do. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Just a steady kind of calm, the kind you only find when you've stopped asking permission to live your own life. I dressed in my favorite navy cardigan, the one that didn't match my scarf but made me feel strong. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see someone abandoned. I saw someone becoming. The sky was pale and heavy with winter when I stepped outside. I drove into town, parked in front of the little shipping store I'd passed 1,000 times but never really noticed. Inside, a man with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dev looked up from behind the counter. I need to notarize a few documents, I said. He smiled. Of course. Let's take care of that. He led me to a small desk in the back, tucked between shelves of bubble wrap and a rack of novelty greeting cards. It smelled faintly of paper and something sweet like old coffee and glue. I unfolded the trust documents Mr. Altman had prepared, along with my handwritten letter. Dev scanned the first page, then looked at me with quiet curiosity. Big changes. He nodded. Long overdue ones. He didn't ask more, just handed me a pen and guided me through each signature. Every line I signed felt like closing a chapter that had overstayed its welcome. When it was done, he placed his seal at the bottom, a small, satisfying press of authority that made everything real. And just like that, it was official. The life I'd built, the love I'd given, the legacy I'd earned, all finally in my own hands. As I stepped outside, the wind cut through my coat, sharp but cleansing. I didn't shiver. I breathed it in. On the way home, I stopped by the grocery store, not because I needed anything but because living means doing the small things again. I bought milk, a loaf of bread, a bunch of lilacs on clearance, their petals bruised but still beautiful. When I got home, I filled the chipped vase by the sink and set the flowers in it. The scent filled the kitchen, faint but steady, the smell of something still choosing to bloom. Then my phone buzzed. Greg again. Mom, we really need to talk. You're not answering and it's making things worse. I don't know what's going on, but we're worried. Please call me. The message was longer this time. There was panic in his words, but not remorse. Concern but not ownership. He wasn't sorry for what happened. He was sorry that his comfort had been interrupted. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned the phone off again. No anger. No shaking hands. Just quiet understanding. That afternoon I gathered the folders, Greg's, Emma's, and the trust, and placed them neatly in my fireproof box beneath the bed. Not hidden. Just settled. When I closed the lid, something clicked inside me too. Finished. Not defeated, finished. That night I made soup. Lentils, garlic, carrots. The recipe I used when my husband was alive, when the house was still filled with the sound of people who stayed. The motions came naturally. Not for anyone else, for me. When it was ready, I set the table for one. The same ritual, but it felt different this time. Not a symbol of loneliness, but of reclamation. Ate slowly. Sipped my tea. Lit a single candle. And with every breath, I felt more like myself than I had in decades. Later I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold enough to sting, but not enough to send me back inside. The lilacs glowed faintly through the window behind me, soft purple against the lamplight. Somewhere down the block a dog barked. Car door slammed. Normal sounds. Life going on. And I smiled because mine finally was too. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the woman waiting on a curb for someone else to claim me. I was the woman who'd learned to walk herself home. Irene has taken back everything that once defined her. But one last moment remains. the act that transforms her peace into a message for everyone who's ever been left behind. The morning after the documents were sealed, I woke before sunrise again. But this time the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The sky outside was brushed with silver, the kind of light that makes everything look honest, even the shadows. I brewed my tea and sat by the window, the steam curling up in soft ribbons. For once, I didn't reach for my phone. Didn't check for messages. Didn't wonder if Greg had finally said sorry. Silence. Real, living silence, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. I thought about Emma, her bright laugh, her brave heart. The way she looked at me that weekend. Not like I was fragile, but like I was seen. That's what love is, I think. Not grand gestures or perfect timing. Just presence. Just choosing to stay when it's easier to leave. I stood, walked to the desk, and picked up a small box. The silver earrings I'd bought years ago for Ruby. They were still perfect. Untouched. Waiting. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I wrapped them in soft cloth, placed them in a small envelope with a handwritten note, and added a copy of the trust. On top I wrote, "These are yours, Emma. Not because you asked, but because you showed up. Wear them when you feel uncertain. You're never invisible in this house. Not then, not now, not ever." At the post office, the clerk weighed the package and said, "Looks important." "It is," I replied. "But not in the way most people think." When I got home, I lit a fire in the living room. The flames danced lazily, casting gold across the walls that had held every version of me. The caretaker, the forgiver, the forgotten. Now they held me. 3 days later the phone rang. Emma. Her voice was shaking, part laughter, part tears. "Grandma," she said, breathless. "I don't know what to say." I smiled into the receiver. "You already did, sweetheart. The day you asked if you could visit. The day you came without needing a reason." There was a long pause, the kind filled with warmth, not distance. "I love you," she whispered. "And I love you," I said. After we hung up, I stayed there by the fire, watching the embers fade and glow, like a heartbeat finally slowing into peace. Outside, snow began to fall. Slow, quiet, clean. The street looked soft, forgiving. No chaos, no noise. Just life, moving forward, unbothered. I thought about all the Thanksgivings that came before. The ones I cooked through tears, the ones I sat through politely, the ones I was invited to out of obligation. And then I thought about this one, the one I gave myself. No carving knives. No table full of people pretending to love each other. Just me. Walk. Diner. Slice of pie. And the clearest taste of freedom I've ever known. I took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm still here." And I was. To anyone listening, if you've ever waited for someone who forgot to wait for you, listen close. You can stop now. You can light a candle for yourself. You can buy your own damn pie. And you can begin again right here, right now. Because silence is not emptiness. It's power. It's peace. It's yours. So take it. Own it. Live it. Thanks for listening. If this story felt close to home, don't forget to subscribe. And share your own story in the comments. Because your voice deserves to be heard.